Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Kidlit Live. I'm really happy to be introducing a lovely friend of mine. I met her at the I Am in Print festival. I kind of knew her already from Write Mentor. She'd read one of her stories on there once, or she put a story up on one of the workshops, and it was amazing. And then I was super lucky to hear it in person when she stood up and done it on open mic night. Everyone was in stitches. It was just brilliant. And I think it was called Eyeball Soup. I will check with her after because I've names of titles can go out of my head, but I'm pretty sure it was like Eyeball Soup. But I'll ask her again in a bit. So tonight my guest is Tracy Bullock, or the Fairytale Mum, and I'm really excited to bring her on. So I'm going to bring on Tracy now. Hello.
Hello. So nice to see you.
You too. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on the show. We've met a couple of times now in person, which is lovely. You don't live that far away from me, so we need to meet up more.
No, thank you so much for having me, Arden. I'm really chuffed to be here today.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so happy that you're here. I set up Kidlit Live. You was a bit worried. You was like, well, I don't know if I've got anything to say and stuff like that. And I'm like, look, listen, you have got so much to say. Your experience with writing and everything that you do and how amazing you are at writing, and what I've read and what I've heard is just brilliant. So I'm so glad to have you here to talk about your experiences, what you're up to now. And I'm sure there'll be so many people who will love to hear. And I also just saw a comment on Instagram that David Litchfield was looking forward to watching. So he obviously remembered you from my
legend.
Hilarious too.
No, thank you so much. I'm really chuffed. I know obviously you've interviewed David and Sarah and various other people, and they're all just amazing. And then there's little old me. So thank you so much for having me.
You're amazing. So yeah, I'm absolutely so happy to have you here. So let's get stuck in. Let's find out about you. So have you always known that you wanted to be a writer?
I haven't always known that I've wanted to be a writer, but I guess I've always written in some way, shape, or form. When I was a child, I went down a little bit of an Amdram type route for a while, and I would spend hours in my room writing plays, and I think I wrote a musical at one point. I did write a musical at one point.
Wow, that's really cool.
And it probably wasn't in hindsight. At the time I thought it was. And then as a teenager, I wrote in diaries all the angst and woes that happened. And then I didn't really return to writing until I had my own children. And I came to it out of a dark period in my life, really. When I had my first child, I had postnatal depression. I got it quite bad. It was absolutely terrifying when I had my second child that I might go there again. So I thought, well, I need to keep my head in a positive headspace. What can I do? And I decided that was the point. I was going to learn how to write a book. So I wrote a book, or I wrote a story, and thought it was the best story in the whole wide world, as we all do. And of course, it was absolutely awful. But it did start me off on this journey, which brings me up to today. So I haven't always known that I wanted to write, but I have always written in one way.
That's amazing. Do you know what? I think, like, from a lot of people that I've spoke to, it's kind of quite something that most people have said as well. I think, we've always kind of written, or if you're doing anything that's creative, it's something that you've kind of enjoyed doing, whether you're an artist, whether you're writing, not always knowing that you wanted to actually be a writer of children's books or adult books, but knowing that you love writing. And I think it's so important to have that passion, because that will always shine through when you write. Sorry.
That's right. I was going to say, I think it's something you either do or you don't do. And I think for me, when I really got stuck into it, it's an escape. I know we write ultimately for the children that hopefully read stories at the end of it, but before we get to that point, I am writing for me. It's an escape for me. I'm very selfish like that, really.
Well, you have to love what you're doing, right? And it takes you to places that you wouldn't have gone to, and that is, it depends on what you're writing. It can be either a really deep, dark place, or it can be a complete fairy tale of a place that only you can dream up. And that's what I love about it. That's what I love about anything that's creative, that there's no limit, is there? It's your brain just works in mysterious ways and just comes up with these things that you're like, how do I think of that? Like, I know I've written things and I thought, there's no way I've written that. Surely I've not written that. It's
actually quite funny to look back on some of the things and some of the stories that you've written in the past, thinking, oh yeah, I remember that, and it jogs a memory of something that's happened to you or something you've seen or heard.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously this is Kidlit Live, so we're talking about children's fiction. So we know that you write for children, but what kind of books do you write? What sort of genres of children's fiction do you write, and why have you chose those?
So I started in picture books, and I think I chose picture books because that's where my children were at, or still are at, to be honest with you. I've got 3 children, 8, 5 and 3. And so they're still very much in that arena. But also I've come from being a teacher. I was a teacher in a classroom for a good 10 years, and again, love a picture book. So picture books hold a special place in my heart. In terms of genre, I think sometimes it's quite hard to define a picture book in terms of genre, because they kind of have more of a style or a tone about them. And I don't know about you, but I'm very visual in the way that I kind of think of my ideas and how stories are developed. And so sometimes I get an idea, an image will pop up in my brain, and then the story evolves from that. And it might end up becoming a funny story, or it might end up becoming something more lyrical. It really just depends on what that idea is. The story tells me what it's going to be. I don't tell the story. I'm not in charge at all. The story's in charge of itself sometimes. And
love that.
So I write a mixture of things. Sometimes, like I say, funny, sometimes more lyrical, sometimes it's rhyming, sometimes it's not. It just depends on that particular idea. And then more recently, I've started to dabble in chapter books, and I'm really enjoying being able to have more words to play with and being able to kind of get involved in the characters in a bit of a more nitty-gritty way, and finding out what makes them tick in a different way. So picture books and chapter books is me for now.
I love that. Chapter books are so much fun to write, and I think exactly what you've said, that you've just got that extra space to really get involved with that character, but also because that's still quite a small word count for a book, you've still got those limits. And I think from working with picture books, it really helps to have had that experience to then move up to chapter books, because I know, like, because I write older as well, that having all of those word counts is quite daunting, from going from like 500 words to now I'm like 60,000 words. Like, it's a lot. But chapter books are like, 5,000 to 6,000 words. That's quite a nice, nice length to aim for, isn't it?
It's not daunting for me either as the writer when I sit down and think, right, I'm going to write. And I mean, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you sit down and write with a novel of tens of thousands of words. That's kind of beyond.
Very difficult for me, anyway.
That's amazing. But so I don't know that I've got that. I can't think what the word is right now. I don't know if I've got that in me to be able to write down that many words all in one hit. But yeah, I do like chapter books because sometimes the characters do surprise you with their choices, and then the story can spin off in a slightly different direction, and then you go back to edit what you've already written. It's fun.
Yeah, it really is. So because you won the Scooby Slush Pile Challenge last year, and you was also shortlisted for the Writing Magazine Chapter Book Prize this year. So you've recently started chapter books. Was shortlisted for a prize. I mean, that's amazing. So can you tell us about those texts that got that far in those competitions, and how it felt for you when you heard the news that you were shortlisted and that you won as well?
Gosh, I don't think we ever expect to win, do we? I mean, we enter these competitions, or you put your name out there to do these things, and you hope you might get, listed or long listed or something. But I don't know that we ever expect to win, and I certainly didn't. So the first one you mentioned was the Slush Pile Challenge, the Scooby Slush Pile Challenge, and I remember I was on the Scooby picture book retreat last year, and I was talking to Elaine Klein, who kind of manages the Slush Pile Challenges. She's a volunteers for them, and she was telling us how it was such an amazing opportunity because the agent was looking for 2 stories. You could enter 2 stories this time, whereas normally you could only enter 1 story. And I was like, okay, I'm going to enter this competition. So I did. And Elaine was saying, you make sure, you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. I had done that. ridiculously, double checking that everything was perfect in that, as I sent off the 2 texts I sent off. And the 2 texts I sent off were one called The Dream Sweeper, which was a very lyrical text about a sibling relationship and some children overcoming a nightmare, basically. And then the second one was a story called, let me think now, what was it called? It was called, Inspectosaurus and the Triassic Tea Party. And it was that story.
Tracy.
Thank you. It was that story that caught the judge's attention. And that was a story about a dinosaur called Inspectosaurus who was struggling with FOMO because all the other dinosaurs had been invited to a birthday party and she hadn't. So as revenge, she decides to steal the birthday cake, which is great. Until, of course, they realise the birthday cake's gone missing and then they need a detective to solve who stole it. And they call on her, so she has to solve the mystery, even though she was the culprit. So it was a story, it was funny, it had several twists throughout it, and it was about honesty and sharing. So that caught her attention, which is lovely. Actually, I remember getting the email to say I'd won that because we'd taken our children to the park and I was just parking up the car, getting out and just checking my phone, as you do, casually. And I got this email.
Not refreshing every minute.
Not refreshing every minute. I wasn't expecting anything. It was just, you just look at your phone sometimes out of habit, don't you? Yeah. And I got this email saying, "You've won." And I looked at it and didn't really register. And I looked at it again and thought, "Oh my goodness, I've won." And so I said to the people, my family in the car, my children and my husband, I've won. They thought I'd just won somebody else's book as a prize, which occasionally happens. They hadn't realised that my story had won a prize. So I was very shocked, as were they, but in a good way. And then the other thing you mentioned was the shortlisting for the Writing Magazine Prize, which again was a lovely surprise. That was Eyeball that won that. And Eyeball was a story that had started as a picture book. And when I met you at the I Am in Print Festival, I had a one-to-one with an agent and showed her that story. And she had said, "Oh, it's lovely, it's great, a bit dark maybe, but why don't you write it as a chapter book? I think this would really suit the chapter book market." And I thought at that point, "Oh, well, I've never written a chapter book before. How do you do that then?" I thought I'll give it a go. So I did. And it was shortlisted, which was wonderful. So it made me think, maybe I can write chapter books after all.
So is this the same story that you read out and then it was or is this another eyeball story? Do you have a thing for eyeballs? Or I
don't have a thing for eyeballs. It was based on the same story. So that story came about because I said I was very visual. Yeah. And I don't know where these ideas come from, please. I don't. But one day I just had this thought that popped into my head that was an eyeball rolling down a hill. And I thought to myself, why would a eyeball roll down a hill? Is it that it's trying to escape somebody, or is it being chased by somebody, or is it trying to get somewhere? And I asked myself these questions, and this story came up about an eyeball that was trying to escape all these other Halloween characters because he thought he was going to be made into eyeball soup. And that was a mistake, because to make actual eyeball soup, you need olives, not real eyeballs. So when I turned it into a chapter book, it became the Creepy Cobweb Tower series, and this one was called Eyeballs Escape. So it did change because it became something else, but it was based on the original picture book idea that I had.
Wow, that's such an amazing, like from that development, having that eyeball rolling down the hill to where you've got to now. That's incredible. It's really incredible, isn't it? How I just love how creative minds work.
Yeah, thank you. I really do too, because I think that's it. We end up, spitballing and literally rolling with these ideas and just seeing where they take us. And so we find the one that we think, there's something there. And yeah. I love creative people because they tend to think more like me.
Yes, I've met so many people that I'm like, someone who I can relate to now. It's great. This is the writing community.
Exactly. And when you have one of those crazy thoughts, like an eyeball rolling down a hill, no one bats an eyelid. I love it when we go to these writing festivals or kind of conferences and things, and people are debating really what would appear quite juvenile or silly topics with real, sincerity there, because it's important to understand why that eyeball is running down there. It's got to have a real reason.
Yeah, there can't be no plot holes happening. This eyeball has to be rolling down a hill for a reason. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And in normal day-to-day life outside of the writing community, I'm not so sure that many people really understand that.
No. So talking about the competitions, and because I know there's so many amazing competitions out there. One's closing very soon, the Searchlight Awards. So good luck to anyone who has entered that, because I think they're picture books and they're doing novels as well. So just enter it. You've got time. I think it closes on is it the 30th or the 31st? I think it's Thursday, so it must be the 31st. So enter it if you've got time to. But first, let's listen to some of Tracy's words of wisdom for entering competitions, because she's amazing at writing and doing brilliantly in them.
Oh, bless you. You're very kind. Don't know about that. I'll try. So, words of wisdom. I would say don't second guess whether your story is good enough or not good enough. If you've got something and you think you want to enter the competition and you can afford to enter the competition, just do it. And I think we all know how subjective writing for children or writing full stop is. And to put this, to be really open and honest with you, the story that won the Slash Pile Challenge, I've submitted into other competitions previously and they've got nowhere with it. So it really is very subjective. So just do it. If you want to have a go, just do it. And then I would say, if you're lucky enough to be shortlisted or longlisted or even win, really celebrate, because as you know, the wins don't always come around too often. So make a big deal out of those, do a big sing and dance and whatever you want to do to celebrate, but definitely celebrate it. And if you don't get longlisted, then don't worry about it. Don't read into it too much, because it could mean many millions of different reasons why it didn't. It might just be that no one likes eyeballs that day, or detective dinosaurs. It just wasn't what they liked. They liked fluffy chickens. I don't know. So don't read into it. But either way, whether you listed or you haven't listed, just move on to the next story. I think you enter and then wait for that surprise email. But if it doesn't happen, just keep writing the next story, really. I think that's the way to manage them.
That's great advice, isn't it? I think, just for us, for writers or anybody that's trying to just find an agent or enter competitions or looking for a publishing deal, just don't just stop because you've not heard back or you've had a rejection. Keep on going. There's at that point that might not have worked for that person, but it doesn't mean it might not work for another person at the moment as well. So it's just to keep on going, and I think that's just really good advice, Tracy. Thank you.
Well, that's the business, isn't it? Like people, I'm not there yet, but people tell us all the time that's the business. So you're either going to ride with that and accept that as the way things are, or don't, and then you probably won't get as far as you might want to otherwise. So
but having the support network, I think to meet people that are in the same boat as you, that entering the competitions, that are all there, they all feel the same way you do. Just knowing that you're not alone I think is one of the biggest things of being involved in the writing community, and I think it's so important. So many people are worried to share their work or talk about their work to others, but I think it's kind of one of the best ways to improve your writing and improve your chances. If you're entering these competitions, get some feedback beforehand and be in a critique group and have some trusted writer friends, because everyone is here to help each other, and it's just an amazing supportive community, especially within Kidlit. It's just amazing, and I wouldn't have got as far as we know, and I'm still trying my hardest, but I wouldn't have got as far as I have now without being involved in some amazing organisations and having writer friends like people like you. So it's just an amazing place to be. So when you're thinking about writing, have you done any courses, or do you use anybody's resources to learn more about writing for children?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a list. I've come prepared. So you're right, actually. I was going to say this for the last point, but you mentioned the writing community, and that is massive and a massive part of my learning journey, and probably most other people's learning journey, I think. And not just in terms of them being a support and you being able to champion other people and other people being able to champion you, because you need that for the lows where you haven't got listed and you thought you might do, or and also just to, you know, to celebrate the wins, whether it's for you or whether for somebody else. It's nice to go, yay, you did it. But I think one of the best things I ever did was when I joined Scooby, I joined a critique group, and I've joined a couple more since in different organisations. And my critique partners are just the most wonderful people, just because they are wonderful, but also they've taught me so much, and not just by them feeding back on my stories and me going, oh yeah, I hadn't seen that. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll try it this way. Just the act of having a new story each month, or having a new chapter or something, or a whole chapter book even to critique, it has taught me kind of what works and also what might not work, or how I might improve things. It's such, I couldn't tell you all the things that I've learned through critiquing other people's work and having my own work critiqued as well, of course. So definitely a critique group is like my number one resource. Secondly to that, a big shout out to Amy Sparks, because I know probably everyone who's watching this knows, loves her, been on her courses. They are all amazing. I've done several with her. I just did this week or last week, Scene Sense and The Power of Why. And again,
I've done The Power of Why before. It was amazing.
Doesn't it make you question everything you're writing as you continue to, like, can you write, oh yes, but why is this? Yeah. So Amy Sparks, but any course, I've done her advanced chapter book course and her advanced picture book course, and like you say, Scene Sense and The Power of Why, and a couple of others as well. So massive shout out to her and anything she's got to offer. And then Write Mentor. I know there's quite a few of us that are members of Write Mentor. They're very supportive. They run a lot of courses, and I mean, I don't know about you. When I set out to do something, I'm like a sponge. I want to know everything, and then I can work out what I want to discard and not. So, you know, Save the Cat, I've read it. Write Mentor, I'm part of it. The festivals I'll go to. I'll do anything I can to try and build my knowledge. But two things that I will point out that are completely free are some things I've come across on YouTube. I know my children think that YouTube is just for watching rich, normally American children unwrap various gifts and toys. It's not.
Watch people playing games as well.
People playing games, that one.
Or watching Kidlit Live, everybody.
And watching Kidlit Live, absolutely. There are some useful things like that. And on YouTube, two things that have helped me is there's an American writer called, let me think, I wrote this down somewhere. I think his name's Bernie Sanderson. He's a sci-fi and fantasy writer, but he also is a lecturer in one of the American colleges or universities. And he records all of his lectures, or some of his lectures, and puts them up on YouTube. They're about an hour's long each. And as you know, there's a few about plot, a few about character, a few about world building, and it's really, really helpful. Even though I'm not writing sci-fi or fantasy or even that high up, you know, the age scale yet, or certainly now, I think just your understanding of story, it really helps to pinpoint why things might be working, or why you might need certain beats, or why you might not need certain beats, or why things, you know, how story is made. So I'm going to double check that, but I'm pretty sure his name is Bernie Sanderson. And the second thing, which is also a freebie on YouTube, is now I am going to dig this up so I don't get it wrong. Where did I write it down? Oh yes, is the Lyrical Language Lab by Renee. Is it Renee or Renee? Renee.
I would say Renee, but I'm not sure if
Renee Tulip. Beautiful name. Oh no, Renee Latulip. Yeah, Lyrical Language Lab. Google that, you'd find it, I'm sure. She's got a lot of things on rhyme and meter and helping to understand that, because I think I started writing rhyme thinking, yeah, I know how to write rhyme. Realised I massively didn't know how to write rhyme, and now I think I know how to write rhyme.
You are great at rhyme. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so they would be some of the resources that I have used, but like you say, anything and everything. I think I've started now, I've exhausted YouTube, well, perhaps not, but I've tried to exhaust YouTube, and I've tried to exhaust Write Mentor and Amy Sparks, and Emma Finlayson Palmer's done a course on chapter books that I did recently. I'd definitely recommend that as well. That's really useful. And now
I need to know more about that, because I've seen a lot about it, and I know someone else that's done it as well, a couple of other people that's done it. So yeah, I'd like to learn some more. For another thing for me to do, because I'm like you,
she's really supportive. She's really supportive and generous with her time and her expertise, and any questions we had, we were all just typing away or asking her, and she'd come straight back to us with an answer like, yes, brilliant, now I know that, thank you. And yeah, a really good course was her course. And then the other thing I'm doing now is I'm listening to a lot of podcasts. So I don't know so much about learning, but it's just about becoming familiar with the industry, I think. And I particularly like the Right and Wrong podcast.
That's really good.
Yeah, and it's not just to deal with children's books necessarily. It's the whole shebang. But it's really interesting to kind of listen to people's stories firstly, but also to see how things are being pieced together and how trends might be emerging or not emerging, or just how the industry's working. So yeah, Right and Wrong podcast. I quite like Studio Mate Steve by Steve Lenton. Which has obviously got more of an illustrator's point of view of things, but again, really interesting to hear how illustrators come to picture books especially.
It's so helpful if you're writing picture books to hear from illustrators about what they do. It's so helpful to us, especially when you're just starting out and it's all really like, that first sort of year or two where you're writing it and you're not totally understanding how it works with an illustrator. I think it's a great podcast to listen to for writers as well. Yeah,
definitely. And it's really entertaining. It's funny. He's funny. It's brilliant.
He's brilliant. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's really brilliant. So I like Studio Mate Steve. And then there's one that I've only listened to a couple of episodes to, because sometimes my Spotify account can't find it and other times it can. It's by Story Mix. They do a craft, I think it's called Craft and Conversation, or Conversation and Craft.
Story Mix is just an amazing organisation anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I didn't know about this podcast, so thank you.
Craft and Conversation, I think it's called, and by Story Mix. And a couple of episodes I've listened to, there'll be some tips, and then they might share a reading of a particular story that's coming out or has just come out or something, which is really interesting to listen to. So they kind of analyse that a bit. So yeah, good ones to listen to.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think that'd be so helpful for people. And I now have a new podcast, so thank you very much. And I think that when it comes to writing, there are so many different ways people just write. Some people, like one of my good writer friends, is an intense plotter. Everything is plotted, like in considerable detail. So how about you? Are you a plotter, a pantser? I can go one to the other. I totally pantsed a whole chapter book recently, which Did you read?
I think I read that. Is that the one I read?
Totally pants that.
Yeah.
But sometimes I plot. I think, it depends how I'm feeling on that day. So yeah, how about you? How do you work when it comes?
So I think it's changed over time. So I came to it thinking, I had to write a story. Yeah, and just wrote. I was a complete pantser, and then fairly quickly realised that I didn't know how to write a story. And so learned everything, that sponge of me, seeking out everything I could possibly find, turned me into a die-hard plotter. I needed to know everything before I was going to, start typing away. So I was a pantser, then a plotter, and I think now I've kind of come over that hill, and I'm a bit of both. So I like a good outline of somewhere, where I'm going to head towards. It's interesting. It depends what I'm writing, I think. If I'm writing a picture book, I don't know if it's because it's shorter. I think I'd need more of an outline.
No, I'm very similar to you, actually. With a picture book, I kind of, it's such a small space. I want to know the beginning. I want to know what happens. So I'll have just like, kind of on this spread, possibly this happening. Because I feel like you have to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Totally can't think of the word, but just
bang on.
Yes, yeah, that'll do. That's the word. Yeah, you need to know what you're doing. I mean, not necessarily. You could write and it could take you somewhere else, and that would be absolutely fine as well. But yeah, I'm like you with, if I'm writing picture books, I know how I want most spreads to be. But I can allow myself to come out of that as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I did so I'm gonna double back on what I've just said now. It's making me a bit of a hypocrite, really. So yes, picture books, I definitely need more of a stronger outline than I would for a chapter book, because chapter books, as you kind of learn more about the characters, or as I find that I learn more about the characters I'm writing about, sometimes they surprise you. But I did do a workshop with Write Mentor with Carl Newsom a few months ago, and he was talking
doing the writer in residence.
Yes, that's when he was the writer in residence. And actually, this might be the thing you talked about, the story you talked about earlier. And he was telling us about the way that he writes, and he writes for a very musical perspective, where he's listening to the rhythms and listening to the rhyme rather than thinking very hard and fast about the meter, perhaps. Yeah. And he gave us a challenge to write a story with our listening ear almost, rather than thinking about the meter, which is what I had been doing previously. And so I did. I wrote a story called When I Grow Up, I Want to Be. And it's about a child that's trying to explain what they want to be when they grow up. But they keep being interrupted by some smaller children who are giving them really impossible ideas and impossible suggestions. So they're saying they want to be a unicorn, or the fairy on a Christmas tree, or a bumblebee, or something like that. And so I wrote that, and I'll be very honest with you, I didn't spend too much time planning that. I wrote that listening, and that was a bit of I can write a story like this moment. So, I've been thrown in. I was a pantser, then I was a plotter. Now I'm somewhere in between, and maybe, I don't know, I think the lines are blurring again.
Yeah, a patter, or what else could you be? A plantser. Yeah,
maybe
in the middle. Yeah, I was on that workshop. I remember that story. I think that's when I read out Big Bad Bum. Part of that anyway. Yeah, no, that was great. I hope that you're carrying on with that story and getting that out there in the world, because I can imagine that being something that people would really, kids. I enjoyed it. Everyone enjoyed it, and the feedback. I remember people just saying in the chat that was really good. So yeah, I know that kids would absolutely love that, because it was just so much fun, and just took you to places like what we spoke about earlier. Just like how do you even think of that? Like what you want to be when you grow up, and yeah, it was just so much fun, and I really hope that something comes of that book, because I know that people will really, really enjoy reading that. Just imagine amazing illustrations with that, because it is such a fun story.
Similarly with Big Bad Bum, though, to be fair, I mean, I can definitely imagine all three of my children sitting down and picking that one. Actually, my daughter, just a quick aside, she has finally cracked using the toilet this summer. Woohoo! Which is great. But I bought her, not that she needs them, a couple of stories, and there's one called Poo Poo Bum Bum Wee Wee, I think. Yeah. They're all been singing it for basically the 8 weeks of the summer holidays. They've been singing that. So yeah, I'm all for a poo or a bum book.
Yeah, it's funny how so many people have completely like opposing views on toilet humor. Yeah, it's when because it wasn't that book. Like another book had been out on submission with at my agent, and there was some that's like, we will not absolutely do any fart stories whatsoever, and some were just like, yeah, this was so much fun, but we have something we have something very similar like in the pipeline, or another different kind of pun maybe to do with bums, but yeah, they couldn't do that. They just didn't. That book didn't happen. But yeah, just the views. And when I'd put out a thing, like I pitched Big Bad Bum out just on Twitter for just to ask questions like, would you read this to your children? The majority of people said no, but I think it just depends on location, because I think like humour is different across the globe, and I have people from all over the world like follow all different followers. So I think it's something that it doesn't resonate with people from different, like many other countries, and but British humour is a bit like we just love a bit of toilet humour, don't we? So yeah, it's just but,
well, my children do. I don't know what that says about me and my family, but my children definitely do.
Well, I think kids do. I think it's just as people get older, they start going, "Oh no, I don't want to be talking about that." But I just think kids love it. If a child, and it doesn't even have to be about toilet humour, but if a child enjoys something, then they're more likely to read. They're more likely to then read something else, and they're more likely to then just read for pleasure as they grow up. So I think it really doesn't matter what that child enjoys reading, as long as it's obviously age appropriate, but it will then encourage them just to carry on reading. Because if you don't enjoy what you're reading, and possibly being forced, like, you know, when you're at school and you have to read the reading books, and some of them you really just don't enjoy because they're just really, really boring, that it's not going to encourage children to read. Like, I remember trying to read with my eldest daughter when she was at school, and she's like, get the reading books out, and she was just like, oh, I don't want to read this, like, because it's all, we kids have to read it. They're learning these certain words, and these books are made for reasons. They're helping children to read, but she would have much rather enjoyed just reading a picture book and got more enjoyment for that. So yeah, I think just enjoying reading is the most important.
Definitely.
Finds it funny. There's
the whole reading for pleasure. I mean, I won't rant about it, but there's a whole reading for pleasure narrative at the moment, isn't there, in school, which is good. We need that. Yes. And it's good that that's finally being, well, it has always been recognised, but it's good that it's being, you know, recognised and brought to the forefront of everyone's attention. Because, yeah, we do need to read for pleasure. Children do need to understand that it's a fun thing to do, and not just about learning phonics or learning, you know, sounds and particular words.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, you know, coming from a teaching background, and for you to say that, it just shows how important it is.
Yeah, and I'll just, you know, I don't think schools have ever necessarily thought of it that way. It's just unfortunate that sometimes that's where some of the assessment and where some of the emphasis has been put. So it's good that we're kind of trying to bring that back now.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So we'll get back to your writing and what you're doing. So at the moment, are you currently querying? Are you putting your stories out on query? I know, like, it's with picture books, it's so hard. There less and less agents are taking picture books on because it's so hard to break out into that market at the moment with publishers. I mean, I know that from being on submission. That's why we're now concentrating on chapter books, because picture books are just really, really difficult at the moment. So can you tell us a little bit about your querying journey and how you're finding it at the moment?
Sure. So I am the world's worst querier, in that I don't query very often, and yeah, I need to change that. So any advice I have on this is probably directed towards me. But so I probably started querying a couple of years ago. And when I say I haven't queried much, I'm not someone that has queried, you know, I've got 6 on the go, and I've got 12 on the go, and now I'm going to do my next batch. I've probably queried 10 people in total in the course of those 12 years, which is probably pretty abysmal by most people's standards, with obviously not a lot of success. But I have had some, you know, responses that have varied widely in that time. So I've been completely ignored, ghosted. Has my query even reached someone's desk? I've no idea. We've gone, you know, that's happened a lot. That's happening a lot now. And then I've had champagne rejection. We've had emails backwards and forwards. The door's been shut, but it's not completely shut, perhaps. So I've had that. And then I had one where I'd submitted a book to an agent, and on their website it had said that they aim to reply to all queries within a month or two, or whatever it was. Anyway, a month or two passed, and I had heard nothing. And so I thought that was that. And then 10 months later, I got an email saying, oh, really sorry for the delay. Could you send some more stories, please?
Wow.
Which I did, and then I heard nothing. So
have you got another 10 months to go yet, or
is that I don't know. We should nudge. I haven't. But yeah, again, I'm not very good.
Send a nudge. I was speaking with Molly last week. She was like, yeah, nudge people, because you can, they're so busy looking after their own clients and everything like that, that sometimes they might need that little nudge. So go ahead and
yeah, I appreciate it. So I think where am I now with it is that I think, because as you say, the market for picture books is so tough right now. And I've had a few agent one-to-ones, and they've said to me, well, I've asked the question actually, I've said, would you rather I came to you as a chapter book writer and said, here's a chapter book, by the way, I happen to also write picture books, would you represent me please? Or would you want me to come to you first and foremost as a picture book writer? And a couple of people have said, we'd be more curious about, we're more likely to have our ears ping up if a chapter book hits our desk right now than a picture book perhaps. But that's probably not true across the board. That's probably down to very individual agents. But because of that, I think I'm going to focus on querying chapter books for a bit and see if that takes me anywhere.
Well, I think that's at the moment, I think it's a really good decision. I think, getting that feedback from the agents, probably they know what publishers are looking for. Yeah, every agent would be looking at your work like subjectively. That would definitely be happening, but they also know what's selling at the moment. So if a few have said, yeah, possibly more inclined to be looking at chapter books, I would definitely be doing what you're doing, going, actually, I think I'll concentrate on chapter books for now, because I don't know about you, if you like, when you've looked at like competitions and stuff like that, the majority of, like, when it's really young fiction, the majority are picture books, middle grade, and the chapter book section is always really small. So I just feel like it just goes to show that there is a market there, and that market needs to grow because there's less people writing it, which means there's possibly that little bit more chance of just like squeezing through that gap. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea. If you're writing chapter books and picture books, possibly just try your hand at the chapter books for now. But yeah, definitely in your query, I would say I also write,
yeah, and I'm sure the tide will turn again in time, perhaps. I mean, these things never stay the same forever, do they? But I mean, you write what you write, regardless of what's going on in the world, I think. But I think I can try and maybe play the querying game. try and match the right query to the right agent at the right time, and get everything to align all at once, and keep everything crossed. So yeah, that's where I am with querying right now.
Oh, brilliant. Well, good luck with your querying, and obviously just keep me informed, because I would love to know how that's all going. Do you have any tips for writers? Any do's or don'ts for writers that are starting to query? What's your advice? So
this is also my advice to me, because I need to do it more. And that is, if you think you're ready to query, don't be timid about it. If you think you're ready to get your work out there, actually get it out there. That's note to myself. But then other than that, I would say from day one, start a spreadsheet, because it's even not having queried that many people in the scheme of things, it becomes quite easy to forget who you've sent something to, which stories you sent them, what their feedback was, if any dates that, when you'd expect to hear by or not, when you should nudge. So I would say start a spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet that I've got, I've also included any competitions that I enter, and if there was a guest judge, what they may or may not have seen, or one-to-ones that I've had. And I'm quite harsh, because I know the whole agent relationship has got to be two-way. So if I've met them or had a one-to-one with them, oh goodness, I hope no one's looking. Oh, everyone's lovely. Everyone is so lovely. But I do always put down a kind of potential compatibility star, number of stars again. It's an important relationship, isn't it? And, yes, ultimately I do want an agent, because that's the direction I see myself going in and see my writing going in. But I also want the right agent, and everyone's lovely, but doesn't mean to say that they're all going to be right for you or for me or for the next person that's coming along. So yeah, I have a spreadsheet. Suggest keeping a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think doing what you said about you've got your compatibility star, I think that's really good, because like I know I had some one-to-ones, and that I had a few, and that was all really good, but there was one that was just a very difficult one-to-one, not for any reason. They liked my story, but we just didn't gel, and it was a video one-to-one, and it just become like awkward. Like it literally didn't last 15 minutes, and you know how quick those agent one-to-ones go, and I can talk to most people. Like I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't feel like I could talk to people and hold conversations, but I couldn't with this agent. It was just so difficult, and it might have just been like both of us just had a bad day, but I just was like, even if they really loved it and said I wanted it, I don't know if I could have worked, because we just didn't gel. But and I think that's really important, and that's how I knew with Molly, that I knew in my heart and in my gut that this was the right relationship, because we just clicked like that, and I knew that I'd feel comfortable just talking to her if I needed to. And I think that relationship is important. Hopefully it will be a lifelong relationship, and if you don't gel, or you've got that gut feeling that this possibly isn't right for you, then just listen to that gut feeling. You might not necessarily have to go, okay, well, I've got a gut feeling this isn't right and I'm not going to do it, but just have a think about it, I think, is what is important. Don't always just jump in and go, well, this one's offered me, I'm just taking it. Just see how you feel, because I think it's so important. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think it's a really, like, it's just it's right. And you was worried about saying it, but it's absolutely right. It's an important thing to make, like a thing to decide, and for you to have the star. At least you know next time if you decide to
scores lots of stars. But I did have one similar to you. I did have one similar to you where it would, the conversation, I think most of them you end up thinking, oh my goodness, I've only got a minute left and I've got so much I want to say still, or I've got so much I want to hear from them still, or whatever it might be. The conversations are flowing. But then I went for the same agent. I did have one where it just was a bit like it stilted, perhaps is the word, and at times. So you just don't know, do you?
No, that's right. And it is like it's not anything about that person or even about you. Not everybody works together, and that's fair enough.
But I was still very gracious for their feedback, because that's why.
And that's why we do. I think I've spoken to so many people that do one-to-ones, and they're there just for feedback. I was there for feedback, but I was also there with that little glimmer of hope, like every single time, please like my work, please. I never went in expecting I would get signed up, not for a million years, but I can't lie and say that hope wasn't there, because it definitely was there. And it ended up working in my favour. So with the one-to-one, so I'd hope that going down the usual like submission or querying ways and going in the slush pile, I would have eventually got there. But I do think it helped just us both know that we worked well together just by having those conversations. So I do like one-to-ones for that, but I do have a love-hate relationship with them, which is something I've spoke about with someone else in the writer community, that I worry that they're not accessible for everybody, and I kind of don't like that. Some places offer a free one for people that maybe couldn't access it otherwise, and I think that's a really great idea. But I'm like, I want everybody to be able to access them equally.
Yeah. I can understand that. I totally understand that. Yeah, because you don't want money to be a barrier. You don't want anything to be a barrier to anyone. We need stories in the world that reflect everyone's background, and all children need to see themselves, don't they? Absolutely. And I think we're in an industry that knows that and is chanting that, but perhaps sometimes some of what's happening isn't necessarily actioning that, if that makes sense. So we've still got a lot of work to do between us all.
Yes, definitely. So let's we'll move away from the querying side, because there's so much to talk about with querying, and it's hard and it's difficult, and but it was also fun as well. I think like I also had a spreadsheet, and I used to really like working through that and just like putting in my boxes, or like looking who do I need to follow up this week, and look at things like that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. But let's just find out what Tracy Bullock is reading at the moment. Do you read just children's, or do you read adult books as well?
Yeah, so I read a lot. Probably not as much as I want to, actually. If I could have, some time on a desert island just to read, I'd be very happy. Read and write. But I'm quite lucky that my children are split across different ages, so I get to read a little bit of everything, just as, regular routine of reading throughout the day or for bedtime stories. So me and my eldest son, we've just finished reading, actually I've got it here, thought I'll show it. We've just finished reading this book, Rex Dinosaur in Disguise. So if you've seen it.
That looks cool.
By, is it Ellis or Elise? Elys? Ellis? Elise?
Elys. Ellis, I would say.
Ellis. Ellis.
I would say Ellis. I feel like Ellis.
Sorry, Ellis.
Who knows?
Yeah, I'd say Ellis. Ellis Dolan. It's brilliant. It's about a dinosaur that has woken up from the kind of ice age, has survived, and is now thrust into the modern day city. And he meets Bigfoot, and together Bigfoot teaches him how to survive as being a human, or pretend to be a human. And it's really funny. So I've just finished reading that. I really love that book. And then
amazing. It sounds like one of my favourite films, but as a book, California Man.
Oh, I don't know. No.
That was Brendan Fraser when he was young, and he was a caveman, and he was like, they found him in ice, and then they defrosted him, and then he had to fit in high school. It was it's so
I'm going to go and watch that now later.
Yes, it's
put it on the watch list.
Brilliant.
Yeah, my watch list is big. My to be read pile is also very big. And then my daughter is still stuck on her favourite stories. So we've got Owl Babies on repeat. We've got My Big Shouting Day by Rebecca Patterson on repeat. And actually, she's always had the thing for bunnies. So she's loving Every Bunny is a Yoga Bunny at the moment by Emily Ann Davison, which is
that's such a lovely story.
Yeah, it is a really lovely story. So they're all lovely stories, actually, to be fair, but we are having them all on repeat. So maybe if she could break it up with a few more, that'd be great.
I've not met another child that does this. This is what Willow does. So we'll have like maybe a week, and most nights we have to read this. So we have 2 bedtime stories most nights. Sometimes it's 3 depending on if we've got time or if I can deal with it that night. Usually we always have 2 bedtime stories, and they're usually the same 2 for at least 3 nights in a row, and then we possibly might move on, but usually it can last like about a week. And I've never met another child that likes the same stories.
No, I think the boys not boys, not so much. My middle son, my middle child, he does, but not to the same extent that my daughter does. She gets hooked. I mean, can't tell you how many times I read One Ted Falls Out of Bed when she was a bit smaller. That was far longer than a week. So yeah, she has the same things on repeat. And then adult-wise, I'm reading, I saw it on your shelf the other day, actually, on one of your Instagram posts. I'm reading Lessons in Chemistry.
Yeah, that's there. I've got this.
Yeah.
And I've got this up facing that way because I met Bonnie Garmus.
Did you?
I did. I will cover my real name. There we go. Because no, you're watching. Arden is a pen name. So I met her on the day I signed with my agent.
Did you really?
And I'd read this book and I loved it, and so it's just important to me. So I have it facing forward on my shelf in the middle, so I can see it the minute I walk in, because it's got a special meaning and it's amazing. So you're currently reading that?
I'm currently reading it, so don't tell me any spoilers. I'm about up to chapter 8. I'm very, very beginning. So Yeah, no spoilers, please. But the beginning, the voice is so powerful, isn't it? It was like, oh wow, okay. So yeah, I do like to read adult books where I can, although most of the time I'm reading children's fiction.
Yes, no, that's the same. And I do love adult books as well, but I feel like I do read more children's, and I think it's because we write it as well. Because I write young adult, I tend to read a lot of young adult books as well. This isn't the type of book, I don't do horror, but I'm currently reading this at the moment for a reason I'll tell you after, because it's top secret at the moment. So there's a reason I'm reading that book, so I'll let you in on that after. But yeah, and it actually, because I have a phobia of not phobia of flying, because I do fly, but I have a phobia of dying. So I have a phobia of like being on a plane and something happening, and this book is about being on a plane and something happening, and I thought, oh my god, I'm not going to be able to read this, but I can, and so far I've not had any nightmares, so woohoo.
Yay! It's like it's therapy. It's a therapy session for you in a book. Yeah. You really more of
what happens on the plane is not my fear. It's quite a spooky thing that happens. Whereas I'm like, I don't really believe totally. I'm still not totally sure, but I wouldn't say 100% believe in like ghosts or evil like this, like there is on this plane, so I can deal with it. If it was like a fault on the plane, I'd be like, I'm not reading that. But
yeah. With films, I don't know if you're like me, where my husband will sometimes suggest we watch a film together. I'm like, okay. He's like, how about a horror? I'm like, okay, I can handle a horror to a point, but if it's all psychological, the Flight of the Navigator as a child, The Labyrinth, those films I would get scared to watch now, because they could almost happen, I
love The Labyrinth. That's one of my all-time favourites from a kid. Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of
Flight of the Navigator, I forgot about that film. I loved that film. Whereas like I get what you're saying. Like when it comes to scary films, I generally don't watch horror anyway. But if I do, I probably watch stuff that can actually happen. Like I don't like paranormal things, so you'll never get me to watch like Paranormal Activity or I don't know what else, like Poltergeist. I don't do things like that. But I can happily watch. I don't anymore, but I happily watched Scream a million times as a kid. Like, and that could happen. Like, but
yeah.
Everything's
a bit too close to reality. Is a bit freaky.
yeah things. So something that really did scare me, oh my goodness, it's totally gone out of my head now. It was a Russell Crowe film. It wasn't even a horror, but it was like it was a thriller. Oh god, I can't. It's totally gone out of my head. I had it and then it went, but that's probably ADHD.
Russell Crowe
film. Yeah, if you're watching it, and there was a bit, and I think he has it has some kind of mental health problem, and it really freaked me out. No, I think it's because I worry, and well, actually, after I had my eldest, I also had a bout of postnatal depression, so I totally understand, and I had a lot of anxiety and worry. And this film, and there was a point where he'd left a baby in the bath, and I could not cope. I ran out of the room, and then it played in my mind for so long. After I was like, I can't watch this film. It's like, because I used to go, what if, like, because my what if brain, even though I knew I would never do it, my impulsive thoughts, what if I do that now, because I know that I'm feeling like, and then I would run away with it. And that was
you run away with ideas, they get stuck in your brain and you can't shake them out. Yeah. I feel you. But we'll move on. We'll move on from that.
We'll move on. This isn't about Kidlit. Anyway, so we've literally got a minute left. So let's quickly. What's next for you? What's your next thing that you're writing at the moment? Next thing you're currently writing. What's next for you?
Okay, so I will say what's next for me. So hopefully next, I need you to keep your fingers crossed, because I've applied for Arts Council funding.
Brilliant, well done.
I don't find out till November, so it's a really long time to wait. So we're just moving on. But if I get it, what I want to do is I want to learn more about chapter books and absorb myself in that world. But I would like, I've called it, I've titled my application something like enabling autistic representation in chapter books, because that's an area I care about. And I want to create a chapter book with an autistic character, where the book isn't about autism, it's about whatever, but the character is incidentally autistic.
Yes.
So yeah, fingers crossed that the funding comes through, and I mean I'll write it regardless, but I can add some lovely things to help me write it along the way.
Oh, amazing. Well, good, Tracy. I wish you all the luck with that. I was awarded it for my YA, and it helped me incredibly. I wouldn't have been able to spend the time I did to write what I had without it. So it's amazing, and good luck. I really, really hope you get it.
Thank you.
And well, it's been so great to talk to you. And you was worried we wouldn't have anything to talk about, and now we've gone over an hour. So look at us, look at you, even.
Thank you, Arden. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, just thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And hopefully, I'm keeping everything crossed for good news for you, and keep me informed. And we'll have you back on with some news another time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Arden.
Thanks, Tracy. See you later. Bye. I really enjoyed chatting to Tracy. She is such an amazing person, a lovely friend, and a brilliant writer. So I'm keeping everything crossed for her Arts Council funding, and for more good news. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to her, and I hope if you've been listening that you've enjoyed it as well. So next week on Thursday, so it is, I'm going to check the date, so Thursday the 7th of September. Can't believe we're in September already. And that is the week my little one is starting school. So it's a busy week. I will be chatting to the powerhouse that is Stuart White from Write Mentor. I can't wait to chat to him. I'm going to talk about his book that he self-published, which was amazing, The Ghosts of Mars, and what he's up to at the moment. I know there's another book called The Nameless that he's got coming out, which I think is tomorrow. Is it the 30th of August tomorrow? So I'm really, really excited to chat to Stuart. And I know that he's put a post up. He's not very well at the moment. So wishing you better, Stuart, if you're watching. And I'll catch up with you next week. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and I will see you again soon. See you later.